scientist at the Mass General Hospital. He will be followed by Dr. Natasha Schul, a cultural anthropologist from MIT.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Chairman Bosley and Chairman Hart and the committee members for the opportunity to be up here talking with you today. I'm Hans Breiter. I'm a psychiatrist at Mass General Hospital and a neuroscientist. I run one of the larger research groups there. It's a group with 80 investigators that go from genetics to brain imaging to experimental psychology and clinical phenotyping. We have been funded from the Office of National Drug Control Policy over the past 5 years to produce the first set of interdisciplinary research that can actually talk about addiction across many different scales, from behavior down to brain circuitry, down to genes. And I'm going to touch on this specifically in the context of gambling, and I have two major points. One, we have virtually no neuroscience information regarding the effects of gambling on the brain. I do know of one piece of information that we do have regarding gambling, and that is a piece of information which we'll come to in a few moments. But basically, gambling with money produces the same activation in a healthy controlled brain, so any of your brains, as an addict having a moderately high dose of cocaine. We started down this road of study with Steve Hyman before he went down to direct the National Institute of Mental Health in the mid-1990s. The second slide you have in the handout that's been passed to you shows activation in the brain of cocaine addicts after they received a moderately high dose of cocaine. This study was done, published 11 years ago. It was the first example that we had that there was a reward system in the human brain, and that this reward system directly was involved with control of your behavior, i.e. motivation. We have only known and been able to localize the motivational circuits in the human for 11 years. Since that time, we've gone on to use other drugs, like low-dose morphine. The third slide you'll see is low-dose morphine in healthy controlled residents of Massachusetts. You'll notice that the activation in the region of a reward circuit called the nucleus accumbens is even brighter than it is with the cocaine infusion that was given to cocaine-dependent subjects. These are very strong compounds. Since that time, up to 7 years ago, we've done multiple other studies using beauty stimuli, money in a game of roulette, and what we have found is that this is a generalized circuitry that responds to many different types of rewards and aversive stimuli. One particular study, the fifth slide, was when we looked at a monetary reward stimulus using a game of chance, and we actually had an individual named Danny Kahneman help us design this experiment. He had come up with an idea called prospect theory, which dealt with irrational choices and why people make choices that are actually against their best interests. Well, what we found is basically the reward system lit up for expectancies of gains and for losses, and it lit up to the same degree as we had seen when people had received cocaine infusions. I was actually challenged by Dr. Kahneman to mix up the data from the cocaine infusion study published in 1997 with the data that we had produced and published in 2001. And he asked me one simple thing. Tell me who was taking part in the gambling study and who was getting a cocaine infusion. I could not. I put some of that data in front of you right here, the fifth slide in this packet. Since that time, we have gone on to actually start looking at this reward aversion system and start seeing what is wrong in addiction. Are there actual structural abnormalities? The sixth slide you see is actually a structure in the brain called the amygdala. It's actually no bigger than the hazelnut. It's right underneath your ears on both sides of your brain, and it's a very fundamental structure. You can't really function very well without it. But when you look at cocaine-dependent individuals, it is 27% smaller than you see in normal control individuals. There are a number of features of this that indicate that it probably is a predisposition. This is just one example of some of the abnormalities you see in cocaine addiction. We have gone on over the past 4 years to see many others, and there's a whole set of these in the seventh slide. We see cortical thinning that looks very much like what you see in Pick's dementia. We see loss of white matter connectivity across the brain. We see hyperactivity in one particular part of the brain. That's what we call the executive center of the brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, right above your right eye. This piece of brain is actually thinner in cocaine-dependent subjects, and what that looks to be due to the actual involvement with addiction. We don't have any information like this with regard to gambling. Absolutely zero. It's only been in the past 4 to 5 years we've started to pull together this type of information around the chemical addictions. Now, you go forward to the 8th slide. They talk about the risk for dependent factor sampling a drug, and this is data from the SAMHSA study. Certain types of drugs have a very high capture rate after a very short stint of sampling them, like cigarettes have a very strong capture rate. Other types of drugs, like alcohol, have a very low capture rate of 6%. We do not know what the capture rate is for gambling. You go on to the 9th slide, talking about risk factors in general for addiction. They're fourfold. What is the potency of the effect on the brain? Secondly, what are environmental factors, like is it actually available in your local neighborhood? 3, what certain behaviors are transmitted across generations? We call these epigenetic factors. And 4th, they're actual genetic pieces. So there's 4 factors. We don't know about these 4 factors with regard to gambling except for one, and that is the potency factor. Gambling is an intensely potent stimulus. I'd like to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, phone me. This is a topic of ongoing study. Thank you.